funky music.
Alright, I wanted to explore something about PuppyRay with the GPU version, and particularly when dealing with animations. What you see here is simply an animation that we're going to scrub through. Now, as we go to the last frame, and if we make any sort of changes, perhaps enabling global illumination or that sort of things, it's doing a new preview, and we can see it here. Perhaps we change the camera position, perhaps the angle at which we're looking, and that sort of thing. And we leave trails in the images. Now, right now we're not, because by default we are looking at the current image here and rendering only as needed, but not rendering in the final buffer. So it's a temporary image that will not be kept. That means we can then start doing an animation of the entire series and still work from the original sequence, like this heavy snowfall here. The problem, though, is that this is not a static image. It is moving, and so we typically will want to go to, let's see, there's another option under, click on More, and you'll see this option here, Animate Each Frame. Right now, when you enable that, you're being cautioned that when using this option, the rendering in the preview frame can corrupt the frames in this mode, because basically this preview is now being saved as you go from one to another. Let's say you adjust a little bit how much of that global illumination you get. That frame now will be saved, and especially if you actually record the keyframes here. Right now I haven't recorded any keyframes yet, so that's still fine. But let's say I'm going to go from this initial position here, moving the camera around maybe here so it's not too bright, changing the light color, perhaps a bit more of a orange tint. There you go. All right, so let's say I want to start with this position, keyframe it here, and then I'm going to the very end, and it's already rendering here at the moment I stop there, right? So every time I go and look at the new position, let's say here along the timeline, I want to change to look this way or this way, right? And I keyframe that position, that direction, that camera angle, and so on, all these parameters. Maybe the next thing I do here is go a little bit further down the timeline, and I adjust the zoom to make it a very wide angle. Keyframe that. And then I'm going further down the timeline and make it a very strong zoom. And perhaps look down a little bit too. Keyframe that. All right, so now I've done that, and for a number of these frames you can see it's already rendered it, because that's what it does. On the GPU it's fast enough that it says, oh, we can go and render that right away. That's fine, but if you now go to render that entire animation, it will see that for many of the frames it still has to render it, but for some of the other frames what it has already been rendered, and then it's going to do a render on top of that. So it's corrupting essentially the animation from which you want the rendering to happen, because it has already put some rendered frames into it. Now that is actually now really easy to work around. And here's what I'll do. First, let me just render that so you can, to really show the effect. If I render that with the animation, you see some of the frames will possibly be affected by the fact that we have already pre-rendered them. And you can see every once in a while there is a frame here that looks off. These are all fine. And soon enough, whenever we reach the next keyframe, at the end of this zoom out session, probably around here. No, maybe not. I mean, like we say, it can. It doesn't always corrupt it, but it can. And the safe thing really to do is to record the different pieces along the timeline, like set the keyframes, and then get out of this. But you see here, for instance, here's one frame that did suffer from it. This is the frame, this is what the frame should look like. This is what it actually rendered, because it took this and rendered on top of that again. So you end up getting some oddities, right? If you scrub through the animation, you'll see every once in a while there's a glitch here, right there. There's one. Okay, and that's basically because the GPU is fast, and we say, okay, let's go render it, and it renders in some of the frames before it actually does the full render on top of that again. Now, what we can do though is you can easily fix that. And in the past, the way to do that would have been to get out of PuppyRay, reload the animation, right? Open it from the and having we had to save it, and I did that before this. Actually, that's not the one. Let's go and open the heavy snowfall. There it is. And so here's that animation again. And PuppyRay in this current session still remembers what were the keyframes that I had along the path. So I can easily go back into transform PuppyRay GPU, and without any further changes, don't scrub through that. Keep this option checked for animate each frame, and I know that the keyframes are still there, and I can simply go and animate and render that. Now this time I'll go a little bit faster just for the sake of time, but you can see that it now has the entire frame sequence. Okay, so one thing that we can do though, we can work even faster by not having to go back to the file, right? Remember this step I had to go through? I had to open this file. Well, what you can do instead is you can just keep it stored, and that's really one of the beauties now with version 9.2. You can store an animation, and so I wanted to show you that. I have this animation. I know I'm going to need to get back to it every once in a while, and that may be because of what I just showed with the PuppyRay GPU on an animation, or it may be because I'm doing some experimenting, right? I'm doing some I'm trying some things with the timeline filters, and at some point maybe I'm not happy with it and I want to go back. Now I can do the undo for one level, but I may have done 2 or 3 steps and not remembered them, and I want to go back to not just one level, but 3 or 4 levels of animation steps. So one thing that you can easily do is simply store this animation. Just like you can store an image here, or you can store a current brush. Let's say if I go and pick an oval region here, and maybe even make it a little bit blurry on the edges, so that would be the selection Gaussian blur alpha or box filter alpha. Show the alpha channel so you can see how much blur you have there along the edge, right? And so that's the alpha channel, the selection mask. You can visualize it here with overlay mode. So everything that's pink tone is not selected. On the inside you see the true color, and that is selected. And I'm going to pick that up as the custom brush. And so now I can store that brush too, store and manage the brush. So you see that you can store a brush, you can store an image. In fact, going back to that alpha channel, when I had this mask here, I can also store that, the selection store alpha. There it is. So these are the 3 things that we've always been able to store. Well, not really always, but over time we've gradually added the ability to go beyond storing just an image snapshot, but also storing the brush and storing the alpha selection. Well, now we can also store an animation. And so I'm going to clear the alpha here and just focus on this animation and say, let's go store it. Store from the animation menu, store animation. Now we have 2 ways to store it there. You can store it in memory, and that's obviously the very fastest way to do it. So if you then go and make any changes, if you go and scrub through this and perhaps apply a filter, let's say the threshold filter, and apply that. Now we know we could do 1 level of undo right here, right? But what if we actually did 2 animation steps? So we applied once and then applied 1 more time. Now we cannot go back. I mean, we can go back 1 level, but that's only 1 level. We needed to go back 2 levels. Well, here we have a stored copy, right? You can, in fact, in this preview, you can actually scrub through that, see the animation you have stored. You can scale it up, and you can simply click it, and that will restore it. All right, so that's a really nice little productivity enhancement feature, if you think about it, because you can go now and do some more filters. Let's say we wanted that threshold, but we fill a bit more of it or a little bit less, and let's go like this and apply that. And then we wanted to add some other, and how, just before we do this, they said, no, let's store this. This is good. That's a good step. This is, this goes to what we always like to say in animation, save often. Keep yourself a snapshot of this, because you can easily go back to this one here, but you can also now go back to this one, or go forward, that is. And then you can perhaps add some other stuff to that, other effects. Let's say we want to do a little bit of a motion blur, and let's say maybe this much, something like this. Okay, so we have this motion blur. Well, let's go store that one too. Store animation to memory. So you see what you can do basically is gradually collect these, and they're all in memory. So that's going to obviously eventually compete for room in how much memory can you allocate. And you might, if you're working with very long animations or very high definition, you might actually want to simply store them on disk in the temp folder. So you can go there, right? That's equally fast. I mean, not equally, but it's very fast too. And that way it avoids storing in memory and perhaps running out of memory too easily. So let's say now we wanted to add a few more effects here, perhaps adding, let's see, creating a different one, actually doing the Perlin noise, and speed and scale and all these parameters here to play with, and in fact even change perhaps how much of that. So we have a keyframe from here, and then here we go and change the speed to a slow speed, and then here we kind of speed it up again, go really speedy Gonzales here, and then on this one perhaps we adjust it like this. Alright, so we apply that, and that will change the parameters of this entire animation. And so now here we have this, and let's say we like that for whatever weird reason, we can go now and store that one as well, right? So now this time I'm going to store it to disk. And by the way, you can try this. If at some point you run out of memory, if you store them to memory, it will actually notice. It will check and then tell you, well, you should start storing this to disk. But it's something you can do right from the beginning if you know that you're going to be dealing with scarce memory resources. So anyway, so we have this animation, and we have this one still available, we have this one still available. Any of these that we have stored, one click away, okay, 2 clicks, right? One to select it, the second one to confirm. And that's basically what I wanted to show, is that you can now bring back that animation really quickly, and having still in memory, or it still remembers on the PuppyRay plugin here what it is that you did, you can still go and render that again. So you could go final render, something like this. Well, obviously that's a different scenario here. Now I need to move my camera position or something. Probably, yeah, I'm way over or I was way below the terrain here. Yeah, there you go. So let's say I'm going to do high quality. That's good enough. Keyframe that, but now I can go and render that. Right, so let's go animate that and go. Now there was this one frame that was messed up again still, and that's because, well, yeah, it rendered it after I loaded and went into the new framework, the new PuppyRay. So that first frame will most likely be re-rendered on top itself. The last one, we didn't scrub to it, that'll be fine. Anywhere in between, we didn't scrub to them, they'll be fine. So we should have a really beautiful, very clean animation on this. And that's really just what I wanted to show you, is that you can work now with multiple animations, pick one, load it, do your work, preparation of the keyframe sequence in PuppyRay, and then get out of it and reload the animation simply by clicking on the stored copy, and then go back into PuppyRay and render your final. And this is what it will look like. So the first frame will likely be messed up because it will have rendered on top of itself, but any of these here will not, and that's the beauty. So what you do here, of course, is you click this button here to delete the current frame, and you now are done. If you need that extra frame that you deleted because maybe you're counting exactly how many frames you have, just duplicate it. You know, who's going to notice out of 30 frames per second that the first two are identical? Right? If you play it at 30 frames a second, just go to that first frame here that's left and insert a frame. It will be a duplicate copy of the one you were just on. So you have two frames here that are identical. Okay, and there you go. Mission solved. Accomplished. Oh, I don't know. I need my coffee to really choose there. All right, have a good day, and we'll see you later again.